We'll call to order the regular Board of Supervisors meeting for Tuesday, October 23rd, 2012. We will start with the invocation and then the Pledge of Allegiance. If you'd all stand, our pastor is not here this morning. So I would ask that you would stand and in a moment of silence, and if you wish to pray in your own way to something in particular, you may do so. Thank you. And if you join me in the pledge, just a reminder to keep our armed forces in our thoughts always. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I thought about that. You can do that on the board. Our next item will be public comment period. We ask if the speakers come forward to please give their name. Each speaker is allocated 3 minutes to speak. Comments should be limited to matters within the jurisdiction of the board. Pursuant to the Brown Act, action or board discussion cannot be taken on open time matters other than to receive the comments and, if deemed necessary, refer them for further follow-up. I do have a couple people who wish to speak during public comment period. I'll start with Randall Faulkner, followed by Dolores Lucero.
Thank you, and good morning. My name is Randall Faulkner. I'm a retired CPA and Department of Defense fraud auditor. When I moved to Shasta County in 2004, I moved here to spend the rest of my days. I was recovering from throat cancer, surgery, and cancer treatments. The odds that I would die in the next 2 years was something between 20 and 40%. I moved here because I love Shasta County, and I love the people here. Shasta is my family's home. However, I was warned about the good old boy politics in Shasta County, but I'd never been politically active and really felt it can't be all that bad. Well, I'm here to tell you and the citizens of Shasta County it is worse than I could ever have imagined. I've witnessed unethical, dirty politics, the hiding of public documents, and downright public lies. I've witnessed physical threats, destruction of private property, and the waste of many millions of Shasta County taxpayer dollars here and in other local municipalities. In coming months, I'll be presenting formal reports to this board and to the public on some of what I and others have discovered in the city of Shasta Lake and in Redding. And yes, Shasta County government does have oversight authority over these local municipalities. But for today, let's quickly address some of the issues in the Shasta County Auditor's Office, especially since this board went to such great lengths to appoint versus allowing the public to vote for a new auditor. As you know, I ran for Shasta County Auditor in 2010. I didn't run for the money, and I didn't run for prestige. I ran to correct the great deficiencies and injustices existing in the Shasta County Auditor's Office for well over a decade. Even as an unknown, I received over 44% of the vote. Why? Because people began to open their eyes about the facts in the auditor's office. It is obvious the current auditor is being encouraged to retire to spend more time with family. The fact is, the current auditor simply could not win re-election in 2014. Legally, the timing of the current auditor's retirement announcement is the sole reason this board was able to claim the law required we appoint versus the option of allowing the people to vote for a new auditor. This was a very astute, orchestrated political maneuver designed to deny the people the right to vote for their county's fiscal watchdog. Let me be perfectly clear. Despite accusations by the current auditor and Mr. Lees and even the local newspaper, this is not about the current auditor. This is not about me. This is about honest, ethical, competent, efficient, effective, and transparent government. Our veterans, our forefathers, and our children deserve responsible and accountable government they can be proud of. Thank you very much.
Mr. Cruz, could you please explain the law about elections and appointments when someone leaves in midterm as an elected official so we get the record clear as to what accusations are being made that are false here?
Certainly. Ms. Rignell, for her own reasons, decided to retire at the midterm. And under the law, when there's a vacancy in an elected office, the board is required to fill that position by appointment. The particular statute at issue has been interpreted by the Attorney General to prohibit a County Board of Supervisors from calling a special election for that purpose. So the only alternative to fill that position was by appointment, which this board has proceeded to do.
Thank you, Mr. Cruz. And I just want to emphasize again, you said the word required. The board is required to do this, we don't have a choice.
Yes.
Yeah, so just so a clarification, so when people make accusations that are false, I'd like to make sure we have a chance to put that out. Thank you. No, sir, your time is up. Dolores Lucero, followed by Sherry Beck.
My name is Dolores Lucero. I live in the city of Shasta Lake. I have so many concerns regarding what's been going on in Shasta County. I mean, it's so hard to kind of even pick one issue because there's so many. That's why it's so hard for me to come up here and to basically be patient and to be able to explain, express myself, because I can't believe that a lot of public officials who hold a position, who's supposed to represent the citizens, are using their authority to manipulate their position, to able to gain from it. And that's what's so disturbing to me. The public official is supposed to know the laws, what laws are prohibited. From the Attorney General, if you go to their website, it explains to you regarding the conflict of interest. There's so many people who committed a law that is prohibit the conflict of interest. I don't know if you know or you just do it on purpose to gain from it. But from what I understand also too is that this law has been around for years, and you have a great attorney who gets paid well by the taxpayers. The attorney is supposed to inform the Board of Supervisors, council members of what laws they're actually breaking. And also there's one law that concerns me. The one is where a public official holds two positions, where it prohibits, meaning no ifs or buts, it's a prohibit law for you to hold two positions when you're on office. Unfortunately, Mrs. Linda Hartman, you hold two positions. And I knew this for a long time, but I had to wait for my time to bring it up. You hold two positions, you represent the veterans, and it's a prohibit law for you to hold two positions, and I'm sure it's a great thing you want to do, but there's a 1 year period of waiting for you to apply for that job, and then 1 year after if you decide to come back and ask for grants. That's why people get into the conflict of interest, but that's why you have an attorney who's supposed to help the public officials to make sure they don't break the laws. And that's where I get my information for the Attorney General. These are not my laws. So that's my concern. My other concern is also you're making a decision to go after Mr. Osamo. You're spending the taxpayers' money. It's not your money, it's the taxpayers. And the taxpayers, you work for us. We don't work for you. We basically don't like how you are spending the taxpayers' money. You should be able to spend it on other things, not on who has the power, who has the control. And that's what it's all about, control.
Thank you, Ms. Lucero. Mr. Cruz, would you explain the part about when you hold two positions? I believe it's two elected positions, but go ahead.
The way the law is written is it deals with a situation where there's basically a two-pronged test. It's does the officer hold two public offices, and then second one is whether or not they are, quote, incompatible. without belaboring the point with Ms. Hartman, she is not currently holding two public offices. The position of Board of Supervisors is, of course, a public office. However, the position, as I understand it, with the state is an employment position, and the law is very clear that this prohibition does not apply when one of the positions is an employment position as opposed to a public office.
Thank you, Mr. Cruz. Ms. Sherry Beck.
Good morning, Chairman Modi and the rest of the board, and Mr. Lees, our County Council. I know that the board has been very concerned about the SRA fees. There has been legislation passed, and as you know, the Howard Jarvis Foundation is opposing that in court. There will be a meeting this evening at the library from 6:30 to 7:30. Assemblyman Jim Nielsen will be bringing us up to date on what is happening on this lawsuit and what is happening to the fees. And I would like to notify the board of this and those in the audience that this meeting will take place at the library at 6:30. Thank you.
Thank you. That's all the requests I have for public speaking. Anybody else on the open time? Seeing none, then we'll move on to our regular calendar. Our first item, R1, is consider a proclamation for Red Ribbon Week, and I will do the proclamation, I hope. A proclamation from the Shasta County Board of Supervisors. Whereas communities across America have been plagued by the numerous problems associated with alcohol and other drug use, with the hope for prevention, starting with the hard work and determination of our communities to create a drug-free environment. And the goal of Red Ribbon Week campaign is to present a unified and visible commitment towards the creation of a drug-free community. And local leaders in government know that support of the youth and adults in their communities are the most effective tool they have in their efforts to reduce the use of and abuse of alcohol and other drugs. And the red ribbon was chosen as a symbol to honor the work of U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration Special Agent Enrique Kiki Camarena, who was kidnapped and murdered by drug traffickers, and to remember other law enforcement officers who have fallen in the war against drugs. And recent reports indicate that alcohol and other drug use and abuse begin at an early age and are especially damaging to one of our most valuable resources, our children. And Shasta County Chemical People, Partners for Drug-Free Community coordinates the Red Ribbon Week campaign to encourage adults to role model for youth and provide the opportunity to demonstrate their commitment to healthy, drug-free lifestyles. And it is important that the entire community, homes, schools, churches, businesses, and governmental agencies unite to organize, support, and promote community awareness of alcohol and other drug problems and encourage drug-free choices. Now, therefore, be resolved that Shasta County Board of Supervisors hereby proclaims the week of October 23rd through the 31st, 2012 as Red Ribbon Week in Shasta County, and encourages all Shasta County citizens to wear and display red ribbons and to participate in substance abuse prevention education activities throughout the week. Been moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Motion carries. Thank you. Oh, we can clap.
Good morning, and thank you for having us. My name is Sergeant First Class Toby Corder. I work with the California National Guard Task Force Domestic Support / Counter Drug. Big long name for basically we come to communities and work hard with people like the chemical people, and my main goal is to do what we're doing here today, is to model for our youth so they see that the future starts where they are now. If they don't start now, it's a little tough to get to where I am or to where you are. Where did we get here? Enrique, as you say, in 1984, and then as we move forward, the movement got bigger and bigger for the Red Ribbon. The great thing about Red Ribbon Week is it brings it to the forefront again that we need to continue with the education of our youth when it comes to prevention. As we continue to do this, we continue to grow in our knowledge base. And one of the biggest things we found is we as adults don't know anything. But the youth, when they talk to other youth, they know it. I can stand up in front of kids and talk till I'm blue in the face, and when they leave, they'll just be like, oh, that was very nice. But he's an adult. He doesn't know what we're going through. They forget that at one point I was a teenager. But what we've learned is that as we role model for them and pass it down to the students, and they pass it down, it's much more effective. The effectiveness of a youth leader in our high schools today, talking to a junior high or elementary school kid, it's amazing. The results we see are amazing because then those kids come back. In fact, working for the chemical people now, we have what were our role model students, and then they've continued. And now they work with new students to pass it down. So today we're going to have a few speakers from Enterprise High School, and they're going to tell you about role modeling and what they see as it from our Friday Night Live program. I'd also like to mention that I am a board member on the Chemical People, and from Enterprise High School, our two students.
Good morning, Shasta County Supervisors and community members. My name is Paige Bailing, and I'm a Friday Night Live student from Enterprise High School. Today I want to talk to you about the importance that adults in our community model a positive and healthy lifestyle for us as youth to look upon and learn from. Everyone explains and understands Red Ribbon Week a little differently. However, overall there is one main purpose: to promote a community that stands against drug and alcohol abuse. For me, it is a way for our community to unite as one and make a strong and visible stand against drugs. But it also serves to remind me of how I dedicated my life to living a drug-free lifestyle. One aspect of promoting a drug-free lifestyle is leading by example. I'm a peer mentor for junior high students through the Shasta County Friday Night Live Peer Mentoring Program. In this program, we discuss the importance of learning how and why to say no to alcohol, tobacco, and other drugs, develop life skills, and have a lot of fun. Another aspect of mentoring is developing healthy relationships through one-on-one time, where a high school student and a junior high student get matched together as mentor and protege. One of my past proteges started the program being shy, quiet, and more than willing for it to be over. But as we got underway and she started seeing the benefits of the program and how much fun she was having, she said, "I love mentoring so much. It's given me a chance to meet new people, come out of my shell, learn and discuss important issues, and have fun." The last day of mentoring, she also told me how glad she was that I was her mentor and what a positive influence I had been in her life. She really opened up and allowed herself to grow into an even more amazing person than she already was. This is the main reason I do mentoring. Not the volunteer hours or the party at the end, but to be a positive influence and help other students, going through the same hardships that I did, to make healthy and positive life choices. To me, mentoring means taking someone under your wing and helping them, in whatever way they need, to encourage and support them in their dreams and goals, and to overall help them support a little of their burden, not carrying them, but guiding them, so that they are able to help others as well. With that, I ask you to join me in wearing a red ribbon for the week, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Hello and good morning, Board of Supervisors and community members. My name is Patricia Denisio, and I am a junior at Enterprise High School. I am also a member of Friday Night Live at Enterprise High School, and I'm here in support of Red Ribbon Week and a drug-free community. Mentoring is not only a part of Friday Night Live or peer mentoring, but of everyday life. Mentoring means, to me personally, a person assisting and teaching another in their problems and struggles in life. To be a mentor is to care for another's physical and mental state. A teacher may mentor their student by teaching them shortcuts and smarter strategizing skills. A parent may mentor their child by expressing their experience of the hardships of life and the lessons learned so the child does not make the same mistake. We, as students, mentor our younger peers in order to prevent unfortunate events that come along with being a teenager of the 21st century. Though parents and adults may know several lessons about life, really no one exactly knows what middle schoolers and high schoolers go through except for, well, us. Mentoring means a lot to me, literally. I look at mentoring as a way of improving another person's life, or in worst cases, saving another person's life. I really base mentoring off of my own experience, Having two hardworking sisters that mentored me about high school and the troubles of drug and alcohol abuse before I entered high school was really such an amazing opportunity for me. Knowing this, I realized that having at least someone warn me about these problems among teenagers was practically a lifesaver. It was then that I realized that using my own experience, I could gain a chance to prevent another from being caught by the horrific swerve known as alcohol or drug abuse. Another part of being a mentor is by leading via example. Really, how much an individual can do by simply stepping away from the crowd is quite incredible. A student witnessing another peer kindly deny drinking or doing drugs can inspire them to do the same. It is because of this that I challenge all of you. That is, I challenge you to lead by example and support Red Ribbon Week and a drug-free community. In your case, simply wearing your Red Ribbon Week all week is a way of leading by example. Express to your community that we can all be mentors in our own way. That by simply wearing your red ribbon, one can be a mentor to numerous others, and who knows with this, what amazing events could happen. Before I finish here, I would like to thank all of you for allowing us to share our opinion and why it's important for adults to model positive, healthy life for the youth in our community. Thank you.
Thank you.
If we could just have a moment of your time and you come down and take a picture with these students, we'd really appreciate it.
We're going to do that in just a second.
Not yet, okay.
Just getting a little ahead of me there, Sergeant. Come on up.
It's his nature.
Paige, Patricia, both come up here, please. Thank you. First of all, thank you for your comments today. They were well spoken and certainly sent a strong message to our kids out there. I think we need to hear that. It's always a pleasure for us to be able to make this proclamation each year for Red Ribbon Week. It's certainly a very worthy effort by everybody. I can tell you from my own personal experience in law enforcement, I know the sheriff would agree with me that the war on drugs is always a very difficult one. It's a long one. It's been ongoing for a long time. But the real difference that will make the success in this will be people like you, Patricia, and you, Paige, where you go and talk to your peers and help them resist the temptations. And that's where we will win the battle one by one through efforts from people like you. So on behalf of the Board of Supervisors, it's my pleasure to present to both of you the proclamation for Red Ribbon Week. Thank you.
Chairman, can I make a comment?
Yes, sorry, thank you.
Ladies, I want to thank you for taking the time to come and talk to us. You know, in the sergeant's comments, he talked about how when adults go and talk to the teenagers that it may not have that impact that it has where you talk to your peers, and I agree with that. But I want you to know that you coming and talking to adults has a tremendous impact, and you were both very, very well spoken. And it helps to remind us that we have to be role models too and go out into the community. So you really are making a difference, not only with your peers, but with the adults as well. So thank you.
Sure, thank you. Supervisor Haas has asked if the sergeant would share a few words with us about his service.
First of all, thank you again. For those of you that don't know, I'm a third-generation farmer. Outside of being in the military, up in MacArthur, California. And my great-grandfather established Little Valley in 1918. His name was Ned Bugnuda. And then we moved from Little Valley out a little bit to the Great Pitville area. I've been in the military since 1987 and been in every conflict except for Afghanistan. I've did 3 combat tours and 6 total deployments. It's an honor. I thank you, Glenn, for giving me a couple of minutes. I really don't know what to say. I'm fairly humble. I've been extremely lucky, I'll tell you that much, to live in Shasta County. It took me 13 years in the military to work my way back around so I could get back home and be back with my family, which 3 generations still live in Fall River. So we're very lucky in that sense to be in Shasta County and live here. Just to give you a few of my deployments, I've been to Honduras, Panama, Kenya, Germany, Iraq, Kuwait, Panama. I can't remember them all off the top of my head, but
It's amazing.
I've been 17 total years of active duty time, so in 3 years I hope to retire. And once again, I thank you for your time and thank you for the work you're doing for our community.
Thank you.
Thank you for your service.
Pretty awesome, huh?
We're lucky to have people like that in
Yes, we
Shasta
are.
County.
Thank you, Toby.
We'll now move on to R2 presentation, our monthly progress report from Chief Probation Officer Foreman regarding the realignment. Chief?
Chairman Modi, members of the board, my name is Wes Foreman. I'm the Chief Probation Officer. Today I'll give you an update after 12 months of implementation. As a reminder, AB 109 transferred responsibility to the county from the state for supervision and incarceration of some low-level prisoners. Our primary focus is to supervise offenders, to do that safely and efficiently, to provide custody and custody alternatives to criminals in jail, to deter their behavior, and to offer treatment, program, and services to change their criminal behavior. Currently, we are supervising 309 individuals. If you are aware of last month's report, last month I reported 311 individuals under supervision. So this is the first month we've actually had a decrease in the number that we're supervising. And that's primarily due to, now that we're 12 months into it, that we're having some terminations. Now, I'm reporting that 36 of those are successful terminations, but there are other terminations. Some are unsuccessful terminations, which include those that revoke their probation and then are sentenced to jail to finish their supervision, or they can actually commit a new crime, then ends up committing them to state prison. There were 10 of those. The rest of them are primarily administrative terminations, and those would include individuals that were mistakenly referred to the county for supervision, which still come under the supervision of parole, so those were transferred back to them. It also includes some transfers out of county. Also listed on this slide, of the 309 that we're supervising, 210 of those meet the high-risk standard.
Chief, could you expand on that? You used the words low level earlier and the word or term high risk there. Could you explain that, please?
Yes. Realignment identified a population, primarily the prison population, which is the bulk of who we receive. What they did is they took that population, which using high risk, high need, dangerous individuals is kind of a descriptor that gets a little confusing. What the state did is they took part of that population, listed them as the lower of the population, lower risk of the population, However, when they come to the probation department, we use a standard risk assessment tool that identifies prior criminal history, the age of when they started committing crimes. There's several other criteria in that determines whether or not they would be likely or at high risk of committing new crimes. And so we use that standard, and that comes out as high risk versus low or medium.
Could you give us an example, not a name or an individual, but a typical example of what type ends up as categorized high risk?
High risk would be primarily your violent individuals, those that have committed crimes against people. So for instance, murder would be a good example, versus individuals that have committed non-victim crimes like property, for instance, or drug offenses, which are primarily self-imposed victim, as opposed to selling drugs to others, which would be victim crimes.
Chief Foreman, thank you, Chairman Modi. Chief Foreman, in your definition, as a follow-up to Supervisor Baugh, you've indicated that high risk falls under the category of violent, and I thought these were supposed to be non-violent people, one of the three nons.
Well, I apologize for the confusion. This category refers to the standard risk assessment that we use to establish whether or not these individuals are high risk at committing a new crime. The high risk category can actually identify if they're high risk in the area of committing another violent crime or committing another property crime. Or another drug crime, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the crime they committed that they were sent to prison on actually met those standards.
When we look at the 210, which you've categorized as high risk, how would you categorize the people that remain in state prison? Are they also high risk?
Well, this high risk is referring to a score on a static risk assessment. The high risk that are staying in prison, if we'll take the populations being sent to prison or at least sent to prison prior to realignment, they would be the higher of that population, the higher risk of that population per the committing offense that they were sent to prison on.
From a community perspective, when people see that 210 out of 309 are categorized as high risk by whatever standard is used, that of course is of concern to folks, as it is of concern to you, I'm sure.
Yes. What the literature will indicate is that those that are under supervision, if we're going to make a difference in changing recidivism, is that we have to identify those that are most likely to commit another offense. That static risk score does that. It identifies those that are at higher risk, which in this case 68%. And so if we place those individuals on intensive caseloads so that we can monitor and supervise them more intensely versus those that are medium and low risk offenders. And then by identifying those high-risk individuals most likely to commit it, then you can invest your energy and provide the treatment programs and services for them to try to get them to change their criminal patterns.
Supervisor Baugh.
So I think you just clarified it there, and that was what I was getting at to begin with. When I see that term, and the public, as Supervisor Keogh pointed out, sees that term, it brings up and sends off the red alarm bells and the flashing lights, and it says, well, my goodness, we've got 2/3 of the people out on the streets that are going to be murderers. But that's not what you're saying here. What you're saying is you have identified those so that you might more intensely supervise. So this is to the public benefit that you are categorizing them as potential, but not necessarily at today's standards.
The fact
they have
that
not committed those higher risks.
Excuse me. The fact that they were all sent to prison means that they have reached some category of being high risk, obviously. We're taking those individuals that have actually served their time in custody, served their sentence, and then we're trying to estimate which of those are at most at risk of committing another crime. That's what we use this high risk score. That's the categories we're referring to.
I think when I look at this, I want to know the whole truth and nothing but the truth, but I also don't want to send out false information or something that might be perceived that way, so I thank you for clarifying it.
Okay, you've seen this chart before. This is those that have been sent to prison or are now serving their time on supervision after they've served their sentence. This chart, what it indicates is that absent the big spike between December and February, the actuals that we're receiving to supervise versus the predictions as estimated by the state are under for the past 4 months. This is stabilized. We expect it to continue this for the future. Contrary to the last slide, our actuals for those that are committed to local prison and mandatory supervision are far less than the predictions that the state indicated. With the exception of 1 month, that month was August, all of the actual numbers have been less than the state predictions. This slide indicates the activity that results in a booking in the jail. What it signifies to me is that the blue bars, those that are being supervised by the county, and the yellow bars are those that are being supervised by parole. What it indicates to me is the activity in the community of those that have been released from prison and are still misbehaving, either in terms of technical violations or having committed another crime. Most of the activity is from those that are still being supervised by parole. Now, as comparison, you look at parole, the actual numbers for those that have been booked in to the jail is 817 versus those PRCS was 140. Trying to find a comparison in terms of how many the parole is supervising versus what the county is supervision. The top arrow indicates in May that parole is supervising 610 individuals versus probation supervision of 247. The bars indicate that there is still a significant significant activity in terms of misbehavior that parole is dealing with that affects those bookings in the jail. Now, if you compare that to the last arrow, it only indicates probation. I was unable to receive from parole the actual number that they're supervising right now. I would expect it to be lower because their numbers that they're supervising are slowly dwindling because so many individuals are now no longer being sent to prison, but instead are being sent to local jail and mandatory supervision. But you'll notice that the numbers here, after the spike in May, that the numbers or the trend may be trending down. Now, using the next... excuse me.
Interrupt you here again. So are you making a comparison, or could you, I guess, make a comparison to the recent, during the last 12 months, figures that we're seeing for local crime increase? Can you relate that to the chart that you just showed us?
Yes, I can relate it to this chart here, indicating that most of that activity, if I was looking at this chart and making a prediction, is that most of that activity is from those that are being supervised by parole, not those that are being supervised by probation or the county.
So not AB 109?
No, there's still
or some?
Well, there's still, well, it depends on how you interpret that. I mean,
well, could you interpret that? That's my question. Is it a direct result of AB 109 early releases? That's what I'm trying to find out here.
Well, the direct result of AB 109 transferred the supervision of some of these people that used to be on parole to county supervision. Okay. That's represented by the blue bars. Those bars are significantly lower in terms of activity for criminal and technical violations than those that are being supervised by parole. Now, prior to realignment, parole was supervising all of these individuals. So, technically speaking, you could say that AB 109 didn't affect the parole population. They're still working with a population that's being released from state prison, and therefore the only real effect on AB 109 is those that we're supervising, and this indicates to me that the county is doing fairly well in their supervision.
Thank you.
Now, these other two slides will also kind of say the same thing. What I'm doing is that this represents the lower bar, the blue bars, only in a separate chart. Note on the left that the actual number is 30 there. It'll be important when we get to the next slide. But this chart indicates the blue on top are the technical violations. So they're non-new law violation kind of behavior, but resulted in misbehavior that meant that they needed to be arrested and put into the jail. The yellow bars indicate those that have been booked in for new law violations. By looking at this, you see that the total misbehaving activity, there are less new law violations than the technical violations. Nonetheless, new violations are the things that the population, the community is real concerned about. If we look at this as a total from October to current, there have been 60 new violations that resulted in bookings. Comparing that to all the individuals that we've touched from October, that is a 15% of that population resulted in new law violations. Comparing it in a different way, if you look from month-to-month process, the numbers of new law violations compared to those that we're supervising is actually less than 10% of the population.
Chief Foreman, is there a adverse relationship between the technical violations and the new law violations? In other words, if people, parolees, have a propensity to commit technical violations, will that gravitate into new law violations?
Not necessarily, but it certainly could mean that they haven't quite grasped the idea of they need to follow society's rules. These technical violations would refer to whether they're showing up on time to visit their probation officer or showing up at all or miss a couple appointments. Whether or not they're attending the programs and services that we referred them to. And sometimes all it takes is a little remedial going out there to talk with them and convince them that they should go to this, that gets them back online. Those that continue to misbehave, however, then we have to up the sanction, and it results sometimes in either a flash incarceration, which we can put them in custody for a short period of time and then try to remotivate them. Sometimes it will result in actually a revocation, so we arrest them, revoke their, or write a report to revoke their supervision, and then depending on what the court decides on, they're either reinstated on supervision or their case is revoked.
Thank you.
Using the same comparison, only this time with the parole offenders, you'll actually look, first of all, at the actual numbers. Obviously, there are far more individuals that are misbehaving in parole. The blue continues to be the technical violations, and the yellow are the new law violations. Comparing, I only have one number that is in May, with which I knew was the total number under supervision, so I've only used that number to compare. 10 that they supervised in May resulted in almost 18% of their population new law violations. But as I've indicated, that number, their supervision numbers are beginning to dwindle, and so we see that the actual booking in the juvenile hall is actually decreasing. And of course, in September, there were only 12 bookings for new law violations. This chart may represent why our numbers in local custody and mandatory supervision has been so low and under the state's projections. Back in spring, we were informed by the court that the failures to appear at arraignment hearings was skyrocketing and climbing, and so we began to chart that. And that chart, going all the way through July, continues.
Chief Foreman.
Yes.
We've lost our, over there.
Oh, okay.
Back. I'll get it back in a second. So, I was going to have you explain the chart a little bit more in detail if you had to.
So the chart that you can't see is actually shows the number of cases of individuals that have failure to appear at the initial hearing to start the court process. There's two numbers there. One is the actual number of cases. The other one refers to the number of defendants. And on my chart, what you can't see is that there would be more failures to appear because one individual can have several failures to appear because their failure to appear relates to the case that they're in court for. What my chart will indicate is that it climbed all the way through July. However, that was considered to be because of the lack of capacity in the jail, so that individuals that are being arrested were being released. They didn't think they needed to show up in court, so they continued to stay away. It resulted in failure to appear after failure to appear after failure to appear. In July, the sheriff was able to open the third floor. And what the chart now indicates after 2 months is that with the increased capacity, and then that also allows for the sheriff, police department, and probation to go out and do what we refer to as sweeps, where we can go out and actually locate the individuals that have been failing to appear in court. Those two solutions have actually, what indicates is that have reduced the number of failures to appear in court. And so now that you see the slide, you'll see in August and September those numbers are beginning to come down. What the court will say, however, is that all we've done is kick the can down the road. What they're seeing is a large number of failures to appear for the next hearing, so the pre-plea and dispo hearings. So we're working with the court, so the sheriff and probation are working with the courts to try to establish a supervised pre-release program, which we hope that once we can provide some legal supervision during the time that they are released into the community, that will actually then get them to show up in court and reduce that number as well. We will have to gather that chart. We worked with the courts yesterday to come up with those numbers. So as we collect those numbers, we'll be able to add those to a chart and see if we can actually affect a change. The HEC program I'll report on. The sheriff will report on a couple of other programs. For the second month in a row, we've been able to keep the number higher than 50, partially due to we've moved probation staff into the jail. That means that we can actually work closely with those individuals that might qualify for the home electronic confinement program. We hope to advance the technology into using GPS. Currently, we have machines that work with a hardline phone, which eliminates some individuals because if they're only using a cell phone, that won't work on them, so we can't use them on this program. By advancing our technology, we'll be able to use the hardline phones and the GPS devices, and we'll actually be able to increase that number. And as I mentioned before, the sheriff, probation, and the courts are working on a supervised release program that will expand this program and will help in the court's failures to appear. Presented this slide last time, and I just want to reinforce the fact that all individuals that come to the probation department are first given a static risk score to identify whether they're at high risk of committing a new crime, and then we provide them with a needs assessment. With that needs assessment, that helps us determine which programs, which services that would help reduce, help make them change their criminal behavior and reduce recidivism. Every offender is being served. We serve them using an individualized plan, and our services are being monitored by a treatment plan. Last month, I reported on 4 individuals that had succeeded. They happen to all be women. So I was confronted with, well, what about our men? So this time I specifically came up with some examples of men that have succeeded in the program. While in prison, Keith thought he needed to give back and help others. Therefore, he educated himself and obtained certificates on the following subjects: life skills, anger management, relationships, and freedom of choice. He is the manager of a sober living residence currently, where he provides transportation and mentors others on things such as keeping a checking account, teaching inmates how to pay bills, and looking for employment. He says probation helped him, and he is grateful, and he continues to do well. Michael came out of prison in November 2011 and was considered high risk for continued drug use. He also had some high aggression and past charges of robbery. Upon his initial intake, Michael made it very clear that he was done with drugs and was tired of being in the system. He said he was going to get a job and did not feel that he needed any assistance from probation. True to his word, he quickly found several odd jobs as a laborer. He and his girlfriend saved money to get their own place. He was able to get a full-time job in April and has been working nonstop ever since. He checks in regularly and has tested clean for all drugs. He and his girlfriend are raising his $2 and her 2-year-old daughter. His probation was successfully terminated in October. Stephen came to probation for supervision on 11/28/11 as a result of multiple DUIs. He was listed as high-risk violence on the static risk assessment. On his initial intake, Steve told the probation officer that he would be working within a couple of weeks and he would be no trouble because he was done screwing up his life. True enough. Within a couple of weeks, he started picking up odd jobs as a handyman. He returned to living with his wife and is working every day. Steve continues to test clean and checks in regularly. He has had no police contacts and has run a clean program. He also signed up for a substance abuse program and started working on his DUI classes in order to regain his driver's license. Jason came to probation on November 14th, 2011. He is coming up on his 1-year date and is due for termination. He has had no new law enforcement contacts and has worked very hard. Jason had aggression issues and was in for domestic violence. Since his release, he and his wife have gone through the court process and had all of their no contact orders lifted. They are back together with their children and doing very well. Jason enrolled at Wright Education for domestic violence classes and is doing his best to attend. Jason has recently been hired full-time. Jason also tests clean and checks in regularly. It's always nice to come up with a few success stories. This next slide lists all the programs that we have either found or helped create to serve the population. We are currently writing contracts for all these services. In regard to the Community Corrections Center, it remains on target for opening the end of January. Recently, we met with the landlord's contractor to make sure that our list of fixes are identical to what they gave us a quote on. We meet one more time with them, and following that, we should be to the point where we can actually sign off on the lease. That'll keep us on schedule. The next activities will be obtaining the permits from the city and then doing the actual fix-it projects. This slide, the only changes are the last two bullets. The first two identify our definition, probation's definition of recidivism, and gives us 2 scores to target. The second to the last bullet is the bullet referring to how many individuals since October have actually been convicted of new criminal offenses. There were no new criminal convictions this month, so that number remains 15, and the score is 4%. By using arrests, however, I've indicated this earlier, there have been 60 individual bookings in the jail for new law violation arrests, and that number equals 15%. Both those numbers right now meet or are under our target comparisons. And now I'll turn it over to the sheriff.
Good morning, Tom DeSanko, Sheriff. The compliance team continues working with AB 109, This last month, they went out and did 4 compliance check operations, which resulted in 62 contacts. 15 of those individuals were 109ers. Did 25 searches. Out of those, 17 were also PRCS or AB 109 personnel that ended up in 8 arrests, and 4 of those were for AB 109 persons. Then warrant sweeps also continued, and then 17 attempts for those PRCS personnel, the 109ers. Sometimes they give an address, turns out to be false, or they give their parents or grandparents as an address, when in fact it's learned that they have not even lived there and maybe not seen their relatives for several months. The number of PRCS offenders booked during September was 21, with flash incarceration being 5, 7 for new local charges, and the offenders serving jail time as a result of a revocation hearing is 5, and then 32 were arrested for parole violations for the month of September. So again, you can see that parole is a significant problem, concern on its impact on the jail and our community as well. As noted by the chief, all floors of the jail are fully staffed and operational at this time. The inmate population is averaging somewhere between 84 to 86%, depending on the given day of the week. We have 10 sentenced inmates in Lassen County under contract, and they have time ranging from 30 days to 2 years. And then with another contract that we have with El Dorado County, we have 7 inmates there with 45 days to 2 years. They're not going to stay there that entire time like for those multi-year sentences. We may end up bringing those back, using them in the jail, or having them on a work release program if they've shown good indicators of at least showing up when they're on a work release program. We have 46 inmates on the home electronic confinement program, and they range from anywhere from 18 days to 10 months. If they fail the terms of being on electronic monitoring, they too can be flash incarcerated. They could be sent out of county, and then also if they are performing what they need to do, whether it be show up for work release, show up for their programs, if they have programs for probation. If they are successful, then they can be taken off of HEC and somebody else can be put on there as well. We are looking forward to when the county secures the contract with BI for GPS monitoring, which will be a huge improvement in where we can actually go and track these individuals down if they violate the law, terms of their HEC confinement or probation. Our plan is still to expand the work release program out to 500 inmates by July and relocate the program off-site where it was down off of Breslauer Lane. And then our staff will be working with the Community Corrections Center in the building and at the work release site, working closely as those people are assessed, but to put them into programs in the work release program as well. Our hiring is still a top priority. We need 5 correctional officers, 4 work release, and 2 service officers. Excuse me. We have 11 correctional officers in background, and 4 correctional officer job offers have been made, and they're in the backgrounding process now. And then we are coming to, I think we're in group 3 of the current test. They're in groups of 10. And then pretty soon, as it moves into some of the other groups, we'll open up the recruitment application period again for another test if we still need more applicants. And we're working very closely with County Support Services for Personnel and have a very good working relationship with them to help this process through. With the multi-year sentences, those are significant impacts on the jail. You can see the, charges there. That 496 charge is receiving stolen property and a violation of probation. All the H&S charges are drug-related offenses. And then the 459 is a burglary charge there. And they range from 10 years to 6 years that are currently in custody. And we have 42 inmates with multi-year sentences. We expect that number will continue to climb as more of these persons under AB 109 sentencing are sentenced in our local courts. That concludes my presentation. Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you, Sheriff. Any other questions, anybody? No, sir. Thank you, Chief Foreman. Appreciate the presentation. We'll now move on to the consent calendar. The following consent calendar items are expected to be routine and non-controversial. They may be acted upon by the board at one time without discussion. Any board member, staff member, or interested person may request that an item be removed from consent calendar for discussion and consideration. I have no advance requests at this time.
Move approval of consent.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Before we move on to the regular calendar, I'm going to take a 5-minute recess.
So you're official, Sherry.